Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Now, we've just completed the week of the Obama State of the Union message, and we'll have in-depth analysis of that. We're now approaching the Obama budget, and between the two of these, we will get the general outline of deception and betrayal. The problem of Obama is that he has adjusted the rhetoric to talk about income inequality and the plight of the middle class and the need for action implicitly to raise the standard of living, although he never quite puts it that way. But even though the rhetoric is going left, the reality remains betrayal, sellout to Wall Street, sellout to the money power. And in particular, last year, we saw this rotten budget compromise, which was supposed to embody the new bipartisan mood. Whenever you hear bipartisan, get a hold of your wallet because your pocket is about to be picked. Bipartisan is a buzzword used to market deception, betrayal, and monstrosities to gullible petty bourgeois. The budget deal last year sacrifices the extended unemployment benefits for what is now almost 2 million families, and it will continue to rise through the year. The extended unemployed, the 99ers in effect, or not even the 99ers, because there was never anything for them, but from the 50-week mark, well, from the 26-week mark on up, they are sacrificed by that budget deal. But we're supposed to celebrate it because it's the bipartisanship, these two criminal gangs, the Wall Street puppets of the Democratic Party and the fascists and reactionaries of the Republican Party get together. That's what comes out. And now we've got the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill, which is going to be voted on by the Senate today being the 31st of January 2014, that ag bill, Farm Bill, is something that it's a piece of genocide. It contains $8.5 billion of cuts in the food stamp program. That's genocide. That is killing Americans. People will die. In particular, 850,000 families are going to lose $90 a month as a result of this particular monstrosity. So the answer to that has to be no, no, and no. But that's what Obama seems to be ready to support. And I'm happy to say this issue is now so extreme that the Washington Post, believe it or not, the Washington Post wants this piece of crime and genocide to be vetoed. Obama should veto the Farm Bill. The editorial published yesterday, Thursday, January 30th, rotten produce. The Farm Bill deserves a veto. Well, remember, Obama in the State of the Union said, fairness and equal opportunity and income inequality are the defining challenge of our time. The Washington Post says, if you believe that, Obama, pick up your phone, since you have a phone, call Congress and tell them that you're inking up your veto pen for the 2014 Farm Bill. This grotesquerie, says the Washington Post, robs from the poor and gives it to the rich. And the specific is, this bill cuts $8.5 billion over 10 years. So it's $850 million per year from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, for the poor. It's for 50 million Americans, 15% of the entire population. And in particular, what is targeted here is the so-called heat and eat provision. If you're a low-income family, and if you're in states where the weather is cold, right? So this is heavily loaded towards the northern climes. The heat and eat program is that if you're getting any federal assistance to heat your home and stay alive that way in the winter, you automatically become eligible for a certain amount of food stamps. The heating program is, of course, LIHEAP. And if you go and get your copy of Obama, the Postmodern Coup, you will see that from early 2008 already, I was attacking Austin the Ghoul Goolsbee of the Obama campaign because of his obvious hostility to the LIHEAP program. That is to say, the low-income heating assistance program. Obama never liked it. This Wall Street puppet and his gang of pseudo-economists never liked it. So in this case, people who get the food stamps that way are going to be left out in the cold where they can starve. Now, the House, of course, with all those reactionaries and fascist Republicans, have passed it 251 to 166. 166 is, to some extent, liberal Democrats who don't want to be part of genocide. There are also some fascisto Republicans in there who say there shouldn't be any food stamps at all. They should all starve. I rather imagine the Paul-Tards are in that camp. Remember, the Paul-Tard position is cut food stamps by 2/3, approximately. That was in the Restore America program of the Ron Paul campaign, issued in the autumn of 2011. But here's the idea. The Senate will vote today, and that will mean the bill goes to Obama. What's he going to do? And I would strongly recommend that that it be vetoed. And indeed, here's the problem for Obama. Obama, you're out there talking about middle class. You're out there talking about income inequality. You want to help people, right? You're trying to pretend that you're not a Wall Street shill. And you're concerned about the minimum wage, and you're concerned about extended unemployment benefits. But wait a minute. Whatever you're giving with one hand, you're taking away and more from almost 1 million families. 1 million households are going to lose $90 a month, and this is a lot. The average benefit, remember, is about, $160 a month. So now you're going to take that away from them, right? That's quite a few meals that will not be eaten. So it means that the entire rhetorical posture of this supposed left turn by Obama, right, the populist turn, the income inequality, all of that is exposed as a complete fraud if Obama does not veto this monstrous farm bill. And then, of course, there's also a whole bunch of agricultural subsidies. Now, I am not automatically hostile to agricultural subsidies because you've got to eat, and you've got to have your own guaranteed in-country production of the principal food staple. So I'm not hostile to that at all. It is, of course, interesting that the Republicans in the House have removed the provision that requires that the benefits under these subsidies, the benefits accruing to members of Congress, have to be disclosed. They don't want that. But the principal thing here is it's not that the subsidies are bad, it's that you shouldn't cut anything out of food stamps. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So the Washington Post, the house organ of the Federal Reserve, as long as it was in the Graham family, the Bezos Amazon house organ now says to Obama, you should veto the farm bill if you have any belief in your own announced principles. Well, we'll soon find out. And again, if Obama lets that one go through when he could stop it, it's not part of a huge budget package, right? It's not life or death, government shutdown or bankruptcy, whatever it is. This is a standalone bill. You could veto it and send it back and say, I won't sign anything that cuts food stamps at all. No cuts to food stamps. Sorry. SNAP is untouchable. Those are people's lives. Otherwise, you get in the same camp with Pellagra Paul, right? Ron Paul cutting food stamps by 2/3 so that various kinds of vitamin deficiency diseases, right? Pellagra, rickets, and scurvy make a big comeback because you can only buy beans and pasta and rice, right? And you miss out on many nutritional elements. You get the idea. So the Washington Post is telling him to veto that. If he doesn't veto it, I think his political coalition falls apart because some of those sort of populist Democrats are going to have to run away from him even more if they want to get reelected, right? And he's playing with his own future too, whether he knows it or not. That we're now hearing these extreme reactionaries, right? The Steve Stockman set, when he makes one of his rare public cameo appearances, is talking about impeachment. So, veto that. More broadly now, let's just look at, we're halfway through this. We've heard the State of the Union. What we want to see is the budget. I had put out in advance that if he mentioned the chained consumer price index, in other words, chiseling, tampering with the cost of living escalator built into Social Security, veterans benefits, and some other benefits, that would be the end of him. I've already just said now, my argument is that if he doesn't veto the farm bill, that could easily be the end of him. And the chained consumer price index was not in the speech. So far, so good, right? That was an important step, right? The Washington Post, of course, Ruth Marcus is complaining that he didn't talk about looting Social Security to deal with that impelling problem of the budget, right, which is so central to all of our lives, right, because we know that someday all of that has to be paid back, except historically it never has been, and that's not the way it works. So he didn't mention the chained consumer price index. What we're waiting for now is the budget coming within the next week or 10 days, where he's either going to repeat his offer to the fascistos to cut Social Security with the chain CPI or not. Now, unfortunately, on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, this is very much alive, and it is obliquely, I think, referred to in the speech, at least as I heard it. He's in favor of free trade and the rest of this stuff. The giant sucking sound and this even more, the jackboot of the international Gestapo backed up by these businessmen and bankers that's coming in, overriding U.S. law, right, creating all of these monstrous situations. So that's still going on. That's bad enough. The other important thing to observe is now that he's entering another year of his second term, right, with Obama, he still has no job program. There's no job-creating program. There's no job-creating program paid for by the Treasury. You can do that to a certain extent, right, as Congressman Conyers does in his bill. You put a Wall Street sales tax on there, use the proceeds to do some job creation on budget. However, as I've always pointed out, that has to be limited. I think that would be essentially limited to people who are unlikely to be employable in the private sector, but that you want to bring into the workforce and give them experience and promote their integration into the workforce. Once they're in the workforce, the money has to come from the nationalized Fed. Today, of course, the last day in office of helicopter Ben Bernanke, and we're now at midnight. The Bernanke era ends and the Yellen era begins. The Yellen era, I don't think, is going to be a very happy one, and it's going to be, I think, a rather turbulent one, and how long it's going to be, I can't tell you. I continue my efforts under the heading of Tarpley for Fed Head. I can tell you how to use the Federal Reserve to get out of a depression and essentially begin the pacification of the world. Yellen will not do that. Yellen, as we heard last week, and you can read that in that Time magazine profile, she believes in trickle-down economics, and she believes that the only way you can act as the Fed is by helping the zombie bankers and, to some extent, the hedge fund hyenas. So the money for the 30 million jobs has to come largely from a credit facility at the Federal Reserve that's got to be opened up. Well, how could you do it? One interesting thing that Obama has done is to rekindle this discussion of executive orders. And we'll talk about what does it mean when a society reaches the point where rule by decree becomes really the only viable option, which is where we are to some extent. But one executive order that Obama could very easily issue: we have a war going on. We're operating under the 9/11 emergency, and we're operating under the authorization to use military force, which was passed in September, October of 2001. So we have an emergency which has been enacted by Congress, and we have a war which continues to go on. Now, an intelligent nationalist American system president would use that situation to issue a number of executive orders. One executive order goes to Yellen, and it says, Yellen, you will open a $5 trillion credit facility. We're going to refinance the student loans because we have to promote education for competitiveness and for national security, National Defense Education Act kind of idea. And we want at least $4 trillion immediately for infrastructure building. Our physical infrastructure is approaching the point of collapse. One of the participants in the Davos conference regaled us with the diagnosis that the U.S. infrastructure is at the level of the third world. True. So we should turn that into an advantage. So we're entering the era of executive orders. The question is the quality of the executive orders. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. Keep up with everything on Tarpley.net, Tarpley.net. Get that book, La France Conquise, if you want to be a knowledgeable analyst and conversationalist about World War I in this centennial year. You better get that book. Read that essay about King Edward VII and his various shenanigans, and other things will be coming up. The Obama State of the Union, therefore, the zeitgeist, the ideological climate of the world is essentially going left, right? There's a populism which would favor concrete initiatives, but Obama is actually moving to the right. And that's not a surprise. That's his job. That's what he's paid for. He's a Wall Street puppet. So therefore, again, the budget deal has sacrificed the extended unemployed, and the Farm Bill proposes to sacrifice the 50 million food stamp recipients. Let me just remind people that it's the Farm Bill comes. It has a big input from the Senate Agricultural Committee. And we won't even talk about the reactionary Republicans in the House of Representatives, but this Debbie Stabenow of Michigan is the one who accepted the idea, the terrain of discussion. How much should we cut? That's not the discussion. The discussion is how much should we add? How much should we increase it? Right? At least Elizabeth Warren has got the sense to say the Social Security benefit has got to go up. The food stamp payment has got to go up, not down, Stabenow. And then we have the despicable Klobuchar, who probably should get a one-way ticket to Nuremberg, Klobuchar coming on television saying, oh, it's just a trifle, nobody cares, it doesn't matter, it's only 850,000 families who are going to lose $90 a month, doesn't amount to a hill of beans, right? Fine, get rid of her. Klobuchar and Stabenow, these two harpies of the Democratic Party in the Senate, right? Gender politics, again, guarantees nothing, right? Cruelty can be found just about anywhere. So this is now the problem as we wait for the budget. Veto that farm bill, and remember, the strategy is to destroy the reactionary Republican Party. They're now meeting in their retreat at Cambridge, Maryland. That retreat, we would like the model for the Republican retreat to be Napoleon's retreat from Moscow in 1812, where most of them don't make it. Right now, the polls all say something else, but with a little bit of effort, the Republican Party is fundamentally an artificial creation at this point. It's an artificial contraption, and it could be brought down with a relatively weak attack. Would be enough to tear them to pieces. And here's what it would be. Take these mass traction economic issues, make it broad, no cuts to Social Security, restoring cuts to Medicare, increases in Medicaid, maybe put that a little bit further down the list, but you get the idea. Increase the minimum wage for everybody, extended unemployment benefits, right? Many people think in the middle class, they think they may need them, they'd like to have them. Food stamps, fully funded. How about stopping foreclosures? Stop foreclosures with, especially from financial institutions that have taken federal money, be it Treasury money or Fed money, and so on down the line. Do something to get the student loan interest rate down to zero. Mass traction economic demands. You pick a list of 5 or 6 or 7 of these points. You decide that you're going to fight for them. You go against the Republicans. The Republicans will be against all those things, obviously. You press the attack, and the Republicans begin to splinter, because these are all very popular things. This is New Deal America, after all. The support for these measures varies between 2/3, 3/4, and 4/5. It's between 67 and 80%, or even more, who want the New Deal economic rights to be maintained. Even many Republicans. You split them right down the middle. You press that attack, you smash the Republicans into pieces, and you destroy them. And that's what has to happen. And you see one of the main factors propping up the Republicans is Obama. And that, of course, is his job. And in particular, I wanted to suggest, the problem is not executive order, no executive order. No. The problem is this. If he uses the executive order for some loony left, loopy, global warming issue, pursuing this discredited theory of anthropogenic global warming, then you're putting yourself essentially on a collision course with everybody, with the entire society. Congressman Waxman says he's quitting. Well, it's about time. Congressman Waxman is the co-author of the infamous Waxman-Markey, which is the global warming carbon tax bill. And despite the efforts of Tom Hartman on the Russian channel, the American people don't want the carbon tax. They don't want austerity and taxation for the sake of this discredited theory, right? Pushed by largely discredited quackademics and other fakers, right? And we've gone through the argument. As a historian, I can tell you the European medieval warm period is warmer than it is now, and that's back around 1300, 1350, and thereabouts. So what Obama should do, or any president should do, is not to abuse the executive order for these ideological hobby horses of rich elitists, but to do things that are going to have mass popularity and mass traction, and that means blue-collar, lower-middle-class working people. First executive order, tell the Fed to buy $400 trillion $4 trillion of state bonds, 100-year maturities for infrastructure. An additional $1 trillion, you buy up all the student loans and transfer them to 0% interest. Another executive order, any bank taking Fed or Treasury money will have to stop foreclosures for at least 10 years and preferably the duration of the economic crisis. An executive order goes to Secretary Lew, and it simply says, obey the 14th Amendment. The debt ceiling is unconstitutional. You're going to hold T-bill auctions and pay the bills of the United States. Bankruptcy is illegal. Now, we also have the Defense Production Act. You could say it's imperative under wartime conditions, right? And we have a war in Afghanistan. It's imperative that we maintain the quality of our labor force and extend the unemployment benefits to 99 weeks, or better yet, indefinitely. That would be a decree that would make sense. In other words, under the emergencies that you have, the 9/11 emergencies, the Afghan war emergency, and everything that goes with it, you've also then got the Defense Production Act, which gives you an inventory, a repertoire of powers that you can use. All of this would allow very significant measures of executive order to be brought up. And if the Republicans then fight that, good, force them to fight on that front and destroy them. And that's the goal, is to destroy them at the same time that you're bringing on an economic recovery. The two go together. They're indissolubly linked. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Back in the Roman Republic, we had the famous Cato the Elder, Cato the Censor, and his constant refrain was, Carthage must be destroyed. Carthaginem delendam censeo. Ceterum Carthaginem delendam censeo. Well, in my case, Republicanos delendos censeo. That means the Republicans must be wiped out as a political party, of course. They'll probably live on as a party down there in the Deep South or the far boondocks or the Intermountain West of racists and reactionaries. That can't be helped. But they must have no purchase on federal policy. And Obama is muffing it. He's blowing this opportunity. Obviously, if we had Romney in power right now, we would have two more wars. We'd have the Syria war, and we'd have an Iran war. And if we had Hillary Clinton in power, I'm afraid we'd have both of those wars as well. So you got to essentially put this all in proportion. Obama is not the worst game in town, but he is very bad, and it has to be fought. Very interesting to see when you attack the Republicans on Twitter, you get these responses saying, oh, wait a minute, there's no difference between the two parties. They're just exactly the same thing. These comments come generally from libertarians, that is, reactionary Republicans on marijuana. And these are Paul-tards in many cases, right? Paul-bearers. They're supporters of the Rand Paul approach, right? Saying, oh, there's no difference between the two parties. Well, not so fast. That is an attractive statement for libertarian reactionaries and for Paul-tards, because that gives them camouflage. It's a way of saying, well, we're not as bad as you think. After all, we're just sort of par for the course. Concerning this food stamp thing, remember, the House Republican proposal was cut food stamps by $40 billion over 10 years, so $4 billion a year. The Democratic proposal was cut food stamps by $4 billion over 10 years, $400 million per year. That's 1/10. It's much less. The compromise number that we see is this monstrous cut 8.5 billion over the next, 10 years. So 8.5, those 850 million per year. The Paul-Tard proposal was cut the whole program by about 63%. Let's call it 2/3, which would have been far more than any of this. So there is a difference. Plus, this is a question of active strategy, not just of passive bookkeeping. Suppose you're the United States in January 1942. If you say Germany first, right? Attack Hitler first. It doesn't. This is not an academic exercise of saying, well, is the Nazi regime worse than the Japanese militarists, right? We've seen the rape of Nanjing and all those tens of millions of people killed in Japan, but at the same time in Nazi Germany, it also looks very bad. It is not a calculation of that nature. It's a question of how do you fight? What do you do? Not simply how do you sit back and pontificate about who's worse, right? Most of the people who send in these no difference between the two parties have absolutely no approach to overcoming the current two parties. And therefore, I repeat, the strategy can only be the destruction of the reactionary fascist Republican Party in place at the federal level at the very least, and then move on to split the Democrats. And let's go through this. The Republicans, if you add it up, are in total disarray. We have Governor McDonnell, former Governor McDonnell of Virginia, and his wife indicted by the feds for bribery. We have Governor Christie of New Jersey probed by a number of agencies for extortion, using federal funds, and for these dirty real estate deals involving the Rockefeller Group already, right? The Garden State Girling in big trouble. We have this famous Republican congressman from Florida who is now quitting, right? Because of his, he says his excuse was that he was an alcoholic, and therefore that got him into cocaine. So this is Radel, R-A-D-E-L. He's quitting. And then we have Ryan Grimm. Very interesting. This thug. I guess he comes from the Christie School of Thuggery, right? Staten Island being close to New Jersey. Remember, Ryan Grimm was one of the only people coming out and defending Christie during Bridgegate and now the Hoboken and other scandals. And he threatens to kill a reporter. He says, I'll break you in two and I'll throw you off this balcony. The Washington Post cartoon shows a journalist cut in two at the bottom of the below the balcony, and that's the new spirit of bipartisanship. All right, so Grimm, that's a death threat. Very interesting. Steve Stockman, mentally unstable, wants to impeach Obama, has taken 2 weeks off, and then makes a cameo appearance at the State of the Union, and then presumably goes back into his hibernation. Right? Voters would expect, they would hope, that Stockman would disappear for a longer time. Let's look at Georgia. Right? Remember the Republican motto: government doesn't work, elect us and we'll prove it. Give us power and we'll prove that government doesn't work. Nathan Deal, another Republican governor, in big trouble because of the snow, right? He went to sleep. He was asleep at the switch. It's worse than Bush in Katrina. And his emergency management director of the state went to sleep. So hundreds of thousands of people inconvenienced, and in some cases lives lost, 15 or 20 people dead. school buses full of kids that couldn't get out of school because it was too much trouble for the august Republican governor of Georgia to stay up and listen to the Weather Bureau reports, the Weather Service, when they told him that it was going to be a severe weather emergency in the Atlanta area. And then we also have our dear reactionary intelligentsia, right? That, remember the group called the Dartmouth Review? This is where Laura Ingraham comes from, I think, and of course Dinesh D'Souza. And Dinesh D'Souza has now been indicted on federal charges of essentially, it's kind of money laundering, right? You're not allowed to say to somebody, here, I've given my limit to this reactionary Republican candidate. I'd like you to give him up to your limit, and I'll reimburse you. I'll pay you that money, right? That's illegal. And as has been said, it's very hard to violate the federal campaign laws after Citizens United. But Dinesh found a way to do it, right? And his, he's a rich movie entrepreneur at this point. The other thing is the vulnerability of the Republicans to being split is shown by the fact that instead of having one response to the Obama State of the Union, they had four. First of all, they had the hack and dunce Kathy McMorris Rogers, who came out and spouted a bunch of Chamber of Commerce platitudes, at the same time trying to touch our hearts with the story of her ghastly family. Then we had Little Rand Paul came out there. And of course, now that the speculative markets overseas are in the process of collapsing, a lot of hot money wants to come home. Little Rand has a useful proposal to help those tax evaders get away with a minimal tax bill. That's his idea of the State of the Union. And a couple of more responses coming up in just a second on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio here on January 31st, 2014. We've got Groundhog Day coming up, Candlemas. It means we're at the midpoint of winter, 6 weeks after Christmas and 6 weeks until the beginning of spring. And we've also got the stupor phenomenon coming up this weekend, and then the Olympics the week about a week from now. And of course, this takes on a special political significance because of the tremendous hysterical campaign in the West against Putin. Very interesting to see Stephen Cohen on Amy Goodman's bankrupt program, Hypocrisy Now. This was about Ukraine and Syria and some other things, but Cohen pointed out that the view of Putin coming from the U.S. media is absolutely insane. And then, even though there were a couple of minutes left in the broadcast, Amy Goodman hurried to cut him off, right? Cohen is somebody who has at least some insight into this. He's an old supporter of Bukharin, but at least that allows some insight into this compared to the vapid, bankrupt left liberalism of somebody like Amy Goodman. So the imperatives are: Obama veto that farm bill with the $8.5 billion in food stamp cuts, or you are impeachment bait. Steve Stockman will be coming for you, along with his lunatic legions. At the same time, you've got to fight hard on that extended jobless benefit. Keep the chained CPI out of the budget and drop the lunacy of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. United Front Against Austerity, active on all of those fronts. Tax Wall Street Party, your way, hopefully this year in a number of locations to do something against this. And if you want to join in that effort, then come forward, right? Contact me through tarpley.net. Tarpley.net Speakers Bureau page has a contact feature, right? People who find it are, well, They can communicate that way. Concerning immigration, before we go any further, right, the other issue here in the background, you've got to have a labor force. Many of these other countries, be it Russia, Japan, China, Europe, they all have a demographic crisis. The United States does not, because of this proclivity that people have to want to come here. Don't throw that away. That's a trump card. Here's what you can do. You obviously want to get the 11 or 12 million, whatever it is. These people must become citizens quite rapidly. We will not accept under any circumstances this despicable Republican proposal of second-class citizenship, that you can be legalized but not a citizen. You can't vote. You can't oppose reactionary Republicans. You're going to essentially be here as a kind of a scab, a legalized scab to pull down wages. The one legitimate beef about immigration is that it pulls down wages. So what you've got to do is make sure that the immigration bill is combined with measures to shore up, support, and indeed increase the general wage scale. So one way you do that is with a $15 per hour minimum wage. And again, Obama could do that by executive order. Let the Republicans howl. Let the Supreme Court howl. Go to the mat. You can do it under the Defense Production Act. You can say, as my responsibility here in wartime, since we have the Afghan war, right, started by Mad Dog Bush the Younger, we still have an emergency. You could do that by executive order. You can say, I hope the Congress will validate this, but if they don't, I'm sorry, I'm the president. Buck stops here. We've got to have a labor force to wage war in the case of Afghanistan, right? Don't let a war go to waste. So far they have. You can say, I have to defend the viability of our labor force, and it's clear that if you're getting less than $15 an hour, that is not viable. The other thing you have to do, though, that puts a kind of a floor under it, but then what happens at the other levels, the somewhat higher levels, you've got to revive the labor movement. Anything that revives the labor movement has got to be embraced and enacted, and the thing that occurs is this card check, right? Not perfect, some problems with it, but in the emergency that we're undoubtedly in, pass card check, force that down the throats of these Republicans. Again, let them break up, let them fight among themselves. But card check, in other words, to facilitate the organization of labor at all levels, that's a very fundamental necessity, because as long as you don't have a healthy trade union movement, you do not have the necessary institutional counterweight to fight against these Wall Street austerity ghouls at all levels. And yes, we're going to get to this lunatic plutocrat, Tom Perkins. Lo, the poor billionaire, he says, right up, an absolute self-parody. The self-parodies have been coming thick and fast, right? Rand Paul warning the destitute against the corrupting power of a federal check. This seems to be out of some kind of satirical novel from the 1930s, but there it is. All right. The Republicans in disarray. McDonnell, Christie, this Florida congressman, Grimm, Nathan Deal of Georgia, D'Souza, all of these people are in big trouble. The four responses, not one, not two, not three, but four responses. Rogers, the dunce and hack with the Chamber of Commerce platitudes, okay. Rand, as we've heard, little Rand Paul running to bail out these hot money speculators, predators, and tax evaders. Mike Lee giving us historical lessons about the true content of the original Tea Party. Mike, your tradition is not the Boston Tea Party, or indeed the actions in distinguished towns of western Massachusetts like Great Barrington or Springfield. No, your tradition is the Mountain Meadows Massacre. Tell us about the Mountain Meadows Massacre and what you've learned about that. And then Ross Lightman gives a slanted version. I would invite somebody who has time. I would have done it this week, but I didn't get around to it, to compare Ross Lightman's Spanish version of the speech to the supposed original of Cathy McMorris Rodgers. Well, anyway, if the opposition party presents itself split into 4 responses, surely that would be an opportunity for a capable politician president to split that party, drive a wedge between the Boehner leadership group and the Rand, Lee, Cruz, and other crackpot extremist forces. Now, the Republicans are in ideological crisis. The Republicans all say now in these speeches, Cathy McMorris Rodgers in particular, that the status quo before Obamacare was unacceptable. Oh, their focus groups must be telling them that the Republican demand to simply repeal is not going to be popular. Now, we do have this Republican proposal, which I just want to go through to some degree. It's coming from Senator Coburn of Oklahoma. Notice he waits until he's leaving to do this because it won't be popular. Orrin Hatch and Burr. Hatch, of course, the Mormon Mafia from Utah. So here's the idea. Under this proposal, the Coburn-Hatch-Burr proposal, there is no individual mandate because there is no compulsion on the insurance company to sell you a policy. In other words, if you have a pre-existing condition, that can be grounds for denying you insurance. So you're back to the bad old days, back to the status quo, the worst feature. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Let's just get some specs on this Coburn-Hatch-Burr fakery. The first thing it does, to totally repeal the Obamacare Act. So total repeal of the Affordable Care Act, meaning they can't say you can keep what you've got, right? Because now a lot of people have something different. If you got your policy under Obamacare and you're getting a subsidy, they're going to take that away from you. How about that? So that's 3 to 4 million people right there, plus everybody who has benefited from the Medicaid expansion. Forget about that. They're going to take your health care away. Man, run and get treated. Run and get treated. If these fascist lunatics take over the Congress and the White House, then you better get treated now, right? Get all the work done that you can immediately, because they're coming after you and they want to take your health care away. That would be a good campaign theme. So repeal Obamacare. Then the pre-existing conditions come back. The insurance company can say no. If you've got a pre-existing condition, they can say, sorry, we won't take you. If somehow you can pay these astronomical premiums for 18 months continuously, right, without a break, then the insurance company is forced to continue you with insurance. But the problem is, once you're approaching 18 months, they're going to have every incentive to kick you off the policy. So pre-existing conditions return. There is no individual mandate, and there are no minimum standards. In other words, there's no definition of what it means to be insured. There's no minimum standard on anything, right? Physical therapy or any of hundreds of other points. No, none of that. There are no specifications on what it means to be insured. There's nothing about mandatory preventive care. There's nothing about wellness visits, mammograms, anything like that. Forget all that. There's no lifetime limit, but there is, according to the summary, a yearly limit. Now, the yearly limit can be just as bad, right? Suppose you get into a terrible accident and you've got to have brain surgery, and all of that is concentrated in 1 year, right? You have the bad luck of having your accident in January rather than in December. It's all going to be concentrated in 1 year. As soon as you reach the limit, you're on your own again. See, Obamacare doesn't have that. The subsidies. Under Obamacare, an individual can get a subsidy with income up to $46,000. Under the Republican proposal, it goes down to $35,000 per year for an individual, similarly for families. And that's that in that $11,000 range, that's the lower middle class right there. The whole lower middle class is crowded in there. They're going to take it on the chin. If you're older, they can. The insurance company is allowed to charge you more, up to 500% more, 5 times the amount. The entire Medicaid expansion, as I said, is rolled back. And how about this? You know, the Republicans are supposed to be against tax hikes. Well, don't look now. These Republicans, Coburn, who's running away, Hatch, and Burr, they're proposing a tax increase. Here's what they want to do. If you're getting your medical insurance through your job, which is the case for 150 million wage earners, theoretically 150 million families, they will no longer allow 100% of that to be paid pre-tax. They're going to say, out of that money that the employer pays for your policy, 35% of that is going to be considered taxable income, and that can get into some real change. So about a third of your bill on medical insurance is going to become post-tax. In other words, taxable by the IRS. Look at that. The Republicans want to raise your taxes to give you less. There's a monstrosity, okay? So all of you libertarians and blowhards out there who don't like Obamacare, this is worse. This is clearly worse. Look at it point by point. The Republicans have made a terrible mistake, like Ron Paul in 2011. They've actually said what it is they want. So let's go back to pre-existing condition. Where you lose your job, you don't have medical care, and if you need to sign up, they'll tell you, sorry, you've got a pre-existing condition, go and die. That's what the Republicans want for you. So actually, there is some sort of difference. And again, the difference only means whether it's going to be Germany first or Japan first. In other words, which one of these powers has to be attacked first? And it's obviously the Republicans. The Republicans are reported to be flailing for new ideas, new pieces of demagogy. And the name that's now in the ascendancy is this guy, Pertho Koukis, another kook. Right after Kukinelli, we've now got Pertho Koukis of the American Enterprise Institute. He seems to be part of the Larry Kudlow clique on Wall Street. But anyway, there we go. All of these Republican figures in big trouble, 4 responses, no policies. This party is ripe for destruction as long as you conduct some sort of attack. Now, concerning the rule by decree, obviously rule by decree is not ideal. Regular order is preferable to rule by decree. But when you reach this point, as I suggested before, the problem is the quality of the executive orders. Again, if you waste your time with executive orders on global warming and carbon and the rest of this, that's going to be a loser, and that's going to be a tragedy, right? That's going to destroy the issuer, but it's also going to destroy the country. The main thing is to make the executive orders such that they actually help produce an economic recovery from the current economic depression. But look, just in terms of the historical parallels, the Weimar Republic, Germany, reached the point of rule by decree in March of 1930. And this was when the government of Chancellor Müller fell. This was a social democratic-led coalition government. Miller was out, and from that point on, right, for the next 3 years until the coming of Hitler, there never was a majority government in Germany. They were all emergency governments enabled by President von Hindenburg. So from that point of view, we are now approximately 3 years from something more dictatorial. That's quite possible. If the Republicans take the White House, that would hold up. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Congressman Waxman quitting the House, thought to indicate that he despairs that the Democrats could ever win back the majority of the House. And we're also told that many Democratic Party donors are giving up on the House of Representatives and focusing on buying up senators, because there you can still have the majority. So now the Democratic Party, chicken-hearted to the last, compounds all of its other crimes with defeatism, which is, of course, a betrayal of the people that they promised to represent. But again, Stabenow and Klobuchar, the two harpies of austerity on that ag bill with the food stamp cut by $8.5 billion, they have committed a deed which should not be forgotten. So the rule by decree. It was in March 1930 that the Hermann Miller government fell, the Social Democratic government, and interestingly enough, it fell over unemployment benefits. The desire was, on the part of the austerity ghouls, the central bankers and so forth at the time, cut the unemployment benefit. Well, you can't cut the unemployment benefit in a depression, which is when you need it most. No, these austerity ghouls pushed forward. There was a group in the social democracy who said, no, we won't stand for this. Let some other government do it, not us. That was the last majority there ever was. And after that, it was all minority governments backed up by emergency decrees from Hindenburg. Now, the U.S. government better designed, but still the idea is it is a grim, preoccupying, disturbing idea that you reach the point of rule by decree. But once you get to that point, don't kid yourself, this is an economic fact. The partisanship is economic, as I've said before. Partisanship is when the lifeboat ethics in the ruling class begin to take over to the point where the losing faction in the ruling class feels that they're going to be wiped out, and therefore they fight for it. That's the source of it. It's not a psychological mood. It doesn't have to do with interpersonal relations. It starts from economics. So Weimarization. This past week in Italy, the new election law has been brought forward, right? The Anglo-American pretty boy, the U.S.-backed Renzi, the new secretary of the Democratic Party of Italy, has brought forth a new election law, which he calls the Italicum, which is supposed to replace other laws with similar sounding names, I guess. But the Italicum is the smaller parties are going to be either wiped out or they're going to be forced to join the larger parties, and there's a bonus if you reach 35%. You immediately rocket up to about 53%, and they won't let the voter choose which candidates they like, the so-called preferences. That's out. And then, as a result of that, the Grillini, the five-star movement of the not-funny comedian Grillo, have caused a ruckus in the Chamber of Deputies at Montecitorio, and was essentially chaos in the parliament. Grillo is trying to impeach the ex-communist Napolitano, the president of the Italian Republic, and they're also trying to oust Madame Boldrini, who is the speaker of the Chamber of Deputies. So what does this show? Does it just show that people are excitable and not happy? No, this has got to do with economics, because that is what those parties obviously represent. The Weimarization, can we also point to culture, right? Here in Washington, we're going to have a version of the Brecht-Weil play Mother Courage, right? Mutter Courage und ihre Kinder. Mother Courage and her children with Kathleen Turner, except since we're here in the U.S., it's a musical. How about that? A musical version of Mother Courage. But this, of course, the essence of Weimar, right? That is the Brecht-Weil answer, as so often happens, to Schiller. They're against Schiller, right? Schiller had Wallenstein's camp, Wallenstein's Lager. And instead, Mother Courage is a woman who follows the armies around Europe in the 1620s and 1630s and 1640s, and tries to make money by various means. Remember, Schiller, poet, stressing the availability of human greatness, and Brecht-Weil, unfortunately, saying it's time to forget about greatness and just focus on what immediate, whatever hedonism you can get. All right, so Weimarization is here. The question is, how do you get out of it? Well, it's the matter of not do you do executive orders or not, because their guy Bush did plenty. It's what kinds of executive orders. And the most important order is the one to the Fed saying, open up that credit facility, $5 trillion, 0% interest, maturities up to 100 years as needed, and get the student loan interest bill down to zero. All of that is within reach. Now, Obama obviously temperamentally, structurally opposed to all of that, but still, who knows? So now we have the economic situation. As I said before, we are here in the last day of the Bernanke era, and well, we have Yellen coming in at midnight. We'll talk about this in just a minute. Let me just finish up the political side of things. Hillary Clinton, big poll this week. This is the other side of the problem. The leadership of the Democratic Party, thoroughly rotten, thoroughly incapable of leading the U.S. out of a depression, and just not useful, right? More inclined to betray than anything else. So that's Hillary Clinton. The poll that we've got, big front page story here in the Washington Post, is that she has a 6-to-1 margin over her competition. It's Hillary 73% among Democrats, Biden 12%, Elizabeth Warren 8%. So it's basically 73 to 20. It's really more like a 3-to-1, but you get the idea. That's a disaster. And here's why. We look at this interesting Time magazine story here. Can anyone stop Hillary? With the pantsuit on the cover. What you have to understand about Hillary Clinton is simply war. She represents war. She means war, like Romney, but maybe even more clear because of her profound psychological need to be the biggest warmonger on the scene. Let's just go into this. Remember, if you had Romney already, you'd have war with Iran and Syria. Similarly, I'm afraid, for Hillary Clinton. I'm quoting now from the article here, Time magazine, January 27th issue. As head of the State Department, Clinton sided with the generals in favor of a large Afghanistan troop surge. Biden was against this. That's a plus for Biden. She pressed to arm the Syrian rebels and later endorsed airstrikes against the Assad regime. She blew it in Benghazi, I suppose she did. And then we have 3 critical decisions where she's on the wrong side. And we'll get to those in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we've got actually the Democratic Party also in a latent schism. The Democrats could easily split between the Wall Street faction and the populist or pro-labor faction, and the Republicans, as we've said, are already divided into four parts when it comes to the response to the State of the Union address. Right? So these parties are in bad shape, and I tried to follow that through the foreign analog of the Berlusconi party, which has now split. Right? There's the Berlusconi Forza Italia, and at the same time, the new center-right of Alfano, which might not survive, but there it is. It has split into two parts. So the principal right-wing party of Italy has split into two parts. These tensions certainly at work in the Democratic Party as well. Now, couple of words about Hillary, right? We wanted to just wrap that up, right? She's in favor of the Afghan surge. She wanted to bomb Syria. She wanted to arm the Syrian rebels. And Benghazi, well, make of that what you want, right? We've described what it really was with Petraeus and Ham trying to help Romney get elected. But three crucial issues: the Afghan surge, the bombing of Libya, and the raid for Osama bin Laden, right, violating the sovereignty of Pakistan. Clinton was more aggressive than Bob Gates. How about that, left-wing liberal Dems? You're going to have somebody who's more of a warmonger than the Republican CIA man Gates? Is that what you want? Now let's also, we got to look at Syria. Moalem of Syria says that the reason the rebels have been able to hang tough in the Geneva talks is because the U.S. has resumed shipments of supposedly non-lethal, but maybe clearly lethal aid to them. So that was an encouragement to them not to be reasonable. Right now, Kerry is on his way to Munich for the so-called Wehrkunde meeting, this defense policy confab that takes place every year. He's going to meet with the representatives of the Ukrainian rebels, that is, some of them in the tradition of the Waffen-SS Galicia division, which seems to be where a lot of these people come from. The Russian Foreign Ministry says that Kerry is lending himself to a circus. And what we see in this Ukrainian civil war very clearly is, thank God for Abraham Lincoln here in the United States, who did not have such doubts, right? We're seeing the weakness of Yanukovych getting the country into a potentially tragic situation. Lincoln had no such hesitation. General Sherman had no such hesitation. Today we have a statement from the leaders of the Ukrainian armed forces asking Yanukovych to take urgent measures to stabilize the situation. I think that means a crackdown, although some journalists try to argue that it does not. For Ukraine, I recommend that you look at the website of Natalia Vitrenko, Vitrenko. Natalia Vitrenko, an old friend. She's the head of the Progressive Socialist Party. This is a pro-Russian, Eurasian party in Ukraine. Her top associate is Congressman Marchenko in Kiev. This is the website that is essentially described this Euromaidan not as a demonstration, but as a fascist coup, a neo-Nazi coup, a pogrom. And it's clear that this has all gotten out of hand now. When you see policemen being burned alive by Molotov cocktails, then a vigorous response is required. And you have to ask which side embodies the values that would allow civilization to continue. I'm sorry, it means that the government is the one that has to be preferred. Similarly to Syria, right? In Syria, it's thought that the rebels are now going home with nothing. They were not able to extort any concessions, and that therefore they are weaker. And people who are weeping about the situation in Syria should tell it to Bandar, tell it to Kerry, tell it to Fabius, and remember that your fundamental choice is Assad or terrorism. And this, all the more so since this story that was the big news item of the beginning of these talks, the 11,000 supposed victims of Assad, this is now shown to be a fraud by Turkish and Russian news sources, and even the New York Times says this compilation of photos of supposed victims was shown to the State Department, and they wouldn't touch it because it was too dubious. London Independent seems to be approaching the hypothesis that the starvation is largely due to blockades of civilians by the rebels. The rebels are starving people out, not principally the Assad forces. And from Kerry, we've been talking about Kerry going nuts, right? Kerry now being more estranged from reality than any neocon. Kerry's thesis, of course, has been now for the last few days that Assad directs al-Qaeda, that Assad has deliberately brought in al-Qaeda, deliberately strengthened al-Qaeda, so that he could argue that the terrorists, that the rebels are actually terrorists. But there it is. That is, he's talking about false flag. He's talking about conspiracy theory. It won't be so easy to dismiss unpleasant arguments with those terms. Egypt, there was a huge explosion of rage against General Sisi on National Public Radio, Diane Rehm. I think now the journalistic community is now freaking out. The Al Jazeera Bureau in Cairo has been rounded up and accused by the Egyptian government of helping Muslim Brotherhood terrorists. And the desire, the love for the Muslim Brotherhood coming from this group of Western journalists on National Pentagon Radio was unbelievable, and I guess it shows what kinds of CIA briefings are going around behind the scenes. But they're vehemently in love with the Ikhwan, and they are full of venom against Sisi, right? Showing that Nasserism is actually what the Western imperialists fear. And of course, Jonathan Landay of the McClatchy chain saying, how dare they accuse Ambassador Patterson of being in cahoots with the terrorists? Well, even there, Karzai, according to the Tuesday, January 28th Washington Post, the main headline in the Washington Post is that Afghanistan President Karzai is accusing the United States of being intimately involved in insurgent attacks, that the U.S. is either aiding or conducting insurgent-style attacks to undermine his government and force him to accept this stationing of forces, right, status of forces agreement, which the U.S. has been pressing for. Let me also point out, since we mentioned Benghazi, Petraeus, and Ham, there's obviously some very big stuff happening in the U.S. officer corps. Well, part of it is simply that this is now a semi-defeated military after these 13 years now almost of war. And what can we say about this? First of all, we have the Malmstrom Air Force Base, 92 officers taking part in a cheating scandal. We have the naval contracting in the Pacific scandal, Glenn Defense Marine Asia, with the corruption of the Criminal Naval Investigating Service, and then two headline stories in the Washington Post. Behavior by the brass vexes military. This is largely molesting women officers, and the other one is that the U.S. officer corps is full of toxic tyrants who scream at their underlings, a culture of toxic military leaders. Now, don't believe the surface story here. What's going on is there's some kind of a power struggle in the officer corps, and I would urge you not to think that these guys are good guys. They may be warmongers, they may be adventurers, they may be putschists. And we'll see you next week.